We are going now to listen to Thomas Hochmann, who is professor of law at the Université de Paris-Nanterre. And he's going to present a talk whose title is Resisting Mirror Propaganda, Militant Democracies, Authoritarian Regimes, and the Fight Against Disinformation. You have the floor.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the invitation. Yeah, that's a very big title for, I don't have so many things to say, I think, but okay. So as you know, democracies have some tools to defend themselves against this deconsolidation phenomenon we are talking about. And as you know, also these tools have been described at first by German scholars, and one of them, Karl Löwenstein, coined this concept of militant democracy. Okay, so the classic examples of such tools include dissolution of anti-democratic political parties. It includes free speech, some free speech restrictions. It includes also Article 17 of the European Convention on Human Rights, with the ideas that no freedom for the enemies of freedom, that you may not use the rights in order to destroy them. Okay, so faced with these defense instruments, authoritarian movements have developed a kind of rhetoric, a kind of discourse that is quite effective. And we could call that mirror propaganda, or accusation in a mirror, if you prefer. Accusation in a mirror is this strategy that consists in reproaching your opponent with what you are doing or what you are planning to do once you'll be able to. This is a term that was coined by a French psychologist called Roger Mucchielli, in the 70s, in 1970. And what's interesting, the concept often is known because of that. It's a concept that was used in Rwanda by the extremist genocidal Hutus to forge their propaganda, their genocidal propaganda. And it's well known that after genocide, some memo was found that was explicitly making reference to Mucchielli's concept, and that explained the project. Okay, and so not in a genocidal context, but in the same way somehow, autocratic movements are doing the same. I mean, they are accusing democratic institutions of implementing the very authoritarian measures that wannabe authoritarian leaders wish to enact once they're in power. And so this means that these autocratic movements, they are using the language of freedom to confront any instruments, any kind of defense, any kind of resistance against them. The best known, the most telling example, of course, is the US, once again, with Trump, Vance, Musk, etc., that are talking all day long about freedom of speech, First Amendment, free expression, and that's at the same time are, of course, restricting freedom of expression in ways that were unheard of in the US for decades. So I would like to focus on this specific right, on freedom of expression. And the first thing that we can observe is that this rhetoric of freedom, of talking about freedom to defend your right to raise to power and to destroy freedom, this kind of rhetoric is very visible in France and elsewhere for sure, but also in France, because the far right, the extreme right, I don't know, in France today has newspapers, has TV or radio broadcast channels, and they circulate these discourse in a very strong manner, and any kind of resistance against the far right is denounced as an act of censorship, as an attack on freedom of expression that would be intolerable in a democracy. Okay, Another example, recent example, is the effort that was led especially by the NGO Reporters Sans Frontières to develop some kind of international standard to promote trustworthy journalism. The idea, you may know, is to have some indicators, to indicators that are developed by the profession, by journalists, by professional journalists, and some kind of method to showcase journalism, real journalism that would meet this kind of indicators. And on the far-right media in France, such effort was, of course, described as pure censorship. So it's any kind of attempt to defend trustworthy journalism, to defend the right of the people to be properly informed, which is something very important to defend democracy. Any attempt to defend this right is described as censorship, and the most common reaction is to quote Orwell, Ministry of Truth, Official Truth, etc., etc. So every kind of resistance against this autocratic movement, and I'm sure that's something you see in other national contexts too, is described as an excessive restriction of free speech, and that may be part of the strategy of normalization, I think. Okay, so that's one thing. If you're interested by this kind of rhetoric, allow me to mention this small book, much smaller than that, who examine a bit this rhetoric. So this rhetoric, it's effective for many reasons, I think. First, because Democrats, they're genuinely, really committed to freedom of expression. I mean, nobody wants to be the censor. Nobody wants to be perceived as the censors, and so it's always a very effective accusation when you say of someone that he's doing censorship. And secondly, it's effective because every instrument of militant democracy is indeed somehow anti-democratic. I mean, hindering a tyrant to rise to power, in a sense, it's anti-democratic. If you think that the majority of the people wants to elect him, if you prevent him from being elected, somehow it's anti-democratic. So that's a well-known paradox that democracy risks to disappear if it does nothing to defend itself, but the act of self-preservation is somehow anti-democratic. Okay, that's the well-known paradox of tolerance, or we could say the paradox of democracy. And so this anti-democratic side of militant democracy, it's something that is exploited by authoritarian movements. They take the clause of the good Democrats, and they denounce any resistance against them. And this is especially powerful, once again, because if you look from far, I mean, the instruments of militant democracy, they seem similar to what is done in authoritarian countries. Okay, take the example of the fight against disinformation. When you see things from a certain distance, it seems that the very tools that are used to undermine democracies, they can also be used to protect democracies. So, for instance, say, sanctioning, punishing a television channel, it can be a way to stifle democratic debates, to silence the opposition, or it can be a way to protect the right to information if this channel is broadcasting fake news and disinformation all day long. So more generally, fighting disinformation can pose a threat to freedom of expression because dictatorships also claim to fight disinformation. I mean, fighting disinformation can be some kind of pretext for censorship and for imposing official truth, and this is the antithesis to democracy. That has nothing to do anymore with democracy. But my point is that this similarity between what militant democracy does and what an autocratic regime does, this similarity should not be overstated. Let me recall this recent case at the European Court of Human Rights, this Bradshaw versus United Kingdom case. As you may recall, the applicants, they were accusing the UK of inaction or insufficient action in the face of Russian interference in several elections, Brexit referendum, some kind of parliamentary elections, etc. And in its judgment, the court insists upon the importance to fight the dissemination of disinformation in order to protect democracy. It writes that the circulation of disinformation could potentially interfere with the right to receive information, a right which is inherent to Article 10 of the Convention. So disinformation is a threat to freedom of expression, to the right to information, to democracy. But the court adds immediately, so could any measures taken to counter its circulation. So immediately the European Court say, the European Court of Human Rights say, be careful, yes, disinformation is a threat to democracy, but the fight against disinformation is also a threat to freedom of expression and to democracy. And there is this sentence, there is a very fine line between addressing the dangers of disinformation and outright censorship. Well, I think we should recall that the line is not that fine, actually. The line between fighting disinformation and outright censorship is not that fine, because beyond the apparent similarity, there is a huge difference between the instruments of a militant democracy and those of an autocratic regime. First, and to state the obvious, both do not follow the same objective, okay? The goal is to protect democracy in one case, to destroy democracy in the other. And second, if one looks at these instruments more closely, it appears that they are not as similar as they seem to be. So that the 2 points I'd like to speak about. So let's start with the fundamental difference between something that seeks to defend democracy and a measure that aims to destroy it. The difference is obvious, but I think it's important to recall that it should not be neglected. A democracy, that's an important point, a democracy is not required to treat evenly an autocratic effort and a democratic one. And in this sense, I really think we should all read the concurring opinion written by Judge Jacob in the Bradshaw case I just talked about. Judge Jacob, as you may know, he's an important judge at the European Court of Human Rights, and he's some kind of symbol. I mean, because he's a Hungarian scholar, okay, with a European career. And he's a critic of the authoritarian drift of several European countries, including Hungary. And Jacob, he was elected to the European Court of Human Rights in 2024. Of course, not on the proposal of Orbán's government, but on behalf of Austria. Okay, he's some kind of Austro-Hungarian judge, one could say, because he's a professor at an Austrian university, and so Austria wrote him on the list to be elected at the court. And well, in this case about disinformation, Jacob insists that what the case is about is the self-defense of democracies, which is an important point. And moreover, he points out that a democracy and an authoritarian country should not be treated the same. I mean, it seems to be obvious, but it's not said that often. I mean, it recalled the shaking hands you talked about. And so that means that when one deals with electoral interference, the origin of the interference should be taken into account. And Jacob wrote this. He says electoral interference is problematic, of course, also if it comes from another democratic country, but it is especially problematic if it comes from a non-democratic country. You see, that way, this seems not to be some kind of groundbreaking statement, but I think this is crucial because too often Democrats fall in what we could called the trap of neutrality, the refusing to take sides. But democracies do not have to be neutral towards their enemies. And I mean, and also from the point of view, especially from the point of view of the European Court of Human Rights, who say that democracy is the only system that is compatible with the European Convention on human rights. And so this requires differentiating between an attack against democracy and an effort to protect it. Okay. And so this difference in the goal has legal consequences because the pursuit of a legitimate aim is the first condition to be satisfied when you want to restrict freedoms, okay? If I take, again, the example of the fight against disinformation, such actions can be justified because it's a way to protect the right to receive information, the right to form one's opinion, so to protect freedom of expression, to protect the right to free elections, to protect democracy. But under an authoritarian government, the goal would be something else. It would be to stifle political opposition, and such a hidden agenda, as you know, can be uncovered. I mean, there are some way to do that, and the European Court of Human Rights has this Article 18 that can be used to denounce this kind of hidden agenda. There is actually a case pending before the court against the law adopted in Georgia against so-called foreign agents on the Russian model, and you know this kind of laws. And in an analysis of this law, the Venice Commission pointed out that it could not find a legitimate aim for this law. I mean, he could not find how this law was supposed to protect democracy or free election or something else. So one should not stop with the observation that democratic government and autocratic ones pretend to fight disinformation. One should rather ask why they do it and how they do it. And this Google versus Russia case from July 2025 is another example of false symmetry. Yes. As you may know, the court in this case criticized Russia for contradicting itself when it invoked citizens' rights to information to punish the removal of a pro-Putin video, while at the same time demanding to Google, to YouTube, to remove content critical of the government. That's a contradiction indeed. But we must not be fooled when the same contradiction is invoked against democracies that strive to treat differently honest information and manipulations aimed at destroying the democratic system, okay? So we must not abandon the distinction, for instance, between ideological propaganda and honest information. There is no reason to treat as equal a journalist, a real one, and some kind of activist working on CNews, for instance. They are not the same thing, and so we should not be afraid of drawing a difference between them, and so we should not be impressed by accusation of bias, of official truth, Orwell, etc. So the first thing to remember in order to counter this mirror propaganda is that the fight against disinformation is an effort to protect the right of the public to be properly informed, and not a mere pretext to destroy democracy. So autocratic governments do pretend to fight disinformation, but on the contrary, they aim to silence critics and to fool the electorate. Secondly, and I'm close to the end, secondly, the difference in aims has a consequence on the means that are employed. These are different means between a democracy fighting disinformation and an autocratic regime pretending to fight disinformation. So this means that the instruments that are developed, they are similar only in appearance. The difference does not lie in the use of legal means, because as you know, today, autocratic regimes, they also use the legal form. Okay, so democratic fight against disinformation, autocratic silencing of the opposition, both use legal instruments. But these instruments are not the same. If I keep the example of foreign interference. In France, for example, you have a law, 25 July 2024, aimed at preventing foreign interference. So I will not go into the detail, but this law states that any individual or entity that promotes the interests of a foreign power is subject to some obligation, declaration requirement, etc. And the persons that are targeted by this law, they are quite narrowly defined. Okay, for instance, they must act under the direction of the foreign government. And what do they have to do? They have to disclose some information to some independent authority, etc., etc. The laws against foreign agents that are enacted in more or less autocratic governments, they are similar to that in appearance only. I mean, in language maybe only, but as you can see from some cases at the European Court of Human Rights, which is my source, as you can see, these laws, for instance, they do not describe that precisely the organizations that they target. And these organizations, after that, they have to specify on everything they publish that they are foreign agents, which is a term that sounds quite stigmatizing, or to be hi, I'm a foreign agent, and I will tell you, and so it's quite chilling on speech, and that's something the court observed, especially in this Kobalia versus Russia case, to show that this law acts against the democratic debate. So therefore, invoking as can be done against the French law. You can invoke that the same things that what Russia is doing, that what Georgia is doing. They're invoking such kind of foreign agents laws of autocratic governments to oppose the militant democratic effort to fight foreign interference should be unpersuasive. We should not be moved by that kind of argument. Okay, so to conclude, if I may, my point is that the defense of democracies must resist this trap of confusion, and we should clearly distinguish between militant and authoritarian instruments. We should not be fooled by the autocratic argument that pretends to act like militant democracy, or rather by the argument that engages in mirror propaganda and accuses militant mechanism of being autocratic. Don't know if I'm clear, but I hope so. So in other terms, just because Trump accuses others of fake news, and because he does that to silence criticism, to silence trustworthy journalism, etc., that's not a reason why we should stop fighting disinformation. It's not because Trump said fake news that we are acting like Trump when we fight misinformation. That's the simple idea. So yes, there are undemocratic elements in militant democracies, that's true, but this does not transform democracies into an authoritarian regime. Like there is a small amount of virus in the vaccine, je sais pas comment on dit, but that does not negate the difference, okay, or even the fundamental opposition between the virus and the vaccine. Okay, thank you very much. I'm done.